As you can see there, President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump just landed at Pittsburgh International Airport. They are heading to the Tree of Life synagogue to offer their support to the congregation following this weekend's mass shooting. The president's visit has been welcomed by some and opposed by others. There do appear to be some people who've gathered in Pittsburgh with signs of solidarity, but there are also signs opposing the president. Our David Begnaud is in Pittsburgh outside of the Tree of Life synagogue. We're going to go to him in just a moment. There he is. David, can you please set the scene for us? What is the mood like there today as the president makes his visit?
Somber, as it has been every day. Within the last 30 minutes, the Secret Service actually told the media to get in line. They wanted to search all of us and our equipment to make sure the area was safe. And so we are back now at our positions. And behind me, there is a Secret Service agent, but there are the 11 stars of David with, I would say, upwards of 500 bouquets of flower. Right in front of the synagogue. This is where the president will come. The road has been cleared. There were probably 200 to 300 people in front of the synagogue about an hour ago, and most of the morning there were people here chanting, singing, praying, young children, elderly people, everyone. I have to tell you, Tanya, I have been so impressed with the classiness of the people of Pittsburgh who have come here, grief-stricken, devastated, but yet so generous in just how they have treated everyone the interactions that I have seen, right? There was a bit of a tense moment earlier. There was a man who lives in the area, originally from Russia. He has lived here in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood for about the last 40 years, and he brought a Make America Great Again sign. And he was standing actually just behind me, right here behind the barricade. And there was a man who was probably 10 feet away, and he yelled, "This is not a campaign rally," and show some sensitivity. And the man seemed unfazed. He held the sign, but we haven't seen, there was talk of possible protest. We haven't seen any in this area. It has been very calm, very peaceful. Again, the Secret Service has moved in, awaiting the president's arrival.
Yeah, David, I lived on Squirrel Hill there in Pittsburgh as a child. My parents were completing their graduate work at the University of Pittsburgh, so I have very, very fond memories of that area, and you're right. The people there are just lovely. It's heartbreaking to see what that community is going through now.
So classy, Tanya, and I have to tell you, there was a man who reached out to me on Instagram who lives in the area, and he said, "David, just promise me that when you tell the story of Squirrel Hill, you tell how much the sports and the hockey and the politics and the church is all intertwined in what we do," right? And I mentioned that because some of the Steelers players were actually at one of the funerals today. The Rosenthal brothers, Cecil and David, who were buried earlier today. Both brothers were intellectually disabled. And there was a lady who came, and she was at the funeral, and she said, "I wish you could have heard." The brother-in-law got up and was talking about David. Apparently, David loved the police. And when I have an aunt who's developmentally disabled, and sometimes even though they're adults, they have the mentality of children, much younger than them. And there's a preciousness to them and their spirit, right? And that's what I'm told the Rosenthal brothers were like, and they were both here. There was also, Tanya, a photo that was released earlier today of the husband and wife who died inside the synagogue. They died in the same place where they were married.
Oh, God.
62 years ago, and today their children released a statement. And of course, I can't stop thinking about the 97-year-old lady who died. Shot in the back of the head, sitting in the chair where she was sitting, and shot while she was worshiping.
And
to live 97 years.
She's a Holocaust survivor, correct?
No, that is not correct.
That is not correct.
There was some misreporting about that, Tanya, initially early on, and we actually were trying to confirm it, but her family has since come out and said she was not a Holocaust survivor. But you know what? The fact that she wasn't a Holocaust survivor doesn't take anything away from how senseless her death was and how remarkable her life was.
Absolutely. I love hearing you say that the Pittsburgh Steelers have become involved in this community as it mourns, because you'd be hard-pressed to find a single person in Pittsburgh who's not a die-hard Steelers fan. So it's wonderful to hear that the sports teams there are getting involved. Did you attend any memorials or any services today, David?
No. Usually what happens when the president is coming on a visit like this, you kind of get corralled into an area, and if you leave, it's hard to get back into. So we have other crews who have been at the funerals today. But, you know, when you go to something like that, Tanya, you want to be so respectful. Sometimes families say, hey, come in, shoot the funeral, record it, everything. We do know there will be at least one service that is private, not open to anybody. The other services, we went to taking a respectful position, either outside or inside if we were invited. But no, I have been here. And more to your point about the Steelers and just sort of how sports is interwoven into everything here in this area. There was the man who's the editor of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and he wrote an article, and he quoted an author who wrote a book about American Judaism, and that author wrote that the fabric of American Judaism is woven into Squirrel Hill. Right? Squirrel Hill being one of the most diverse communities in the country, according to the mayor, the people who live here, the governor, and according to what I've been able to find out over the last 72 hours of being here. This area is so eclectic, so diverse, and also so welcoming. I've been struck by the people who were inside that synagogue who have come up to us to thank us for being here, to thank us for telling the stories, right? Survivors. And then I've been so moved by the stories that we've heard, not only of the heroic actions of the police officers, but the fact that the people who treated the gunman, and no need to name them, but the people who treated the gunman were Jewish.
I know.
Now remember that gunman.
And
that
he
gunman
kept
was
yelling
saying,
at them in the hospital.
In the ambulance, at the hospital, and here at the synagogue. And yet one of the emergency room doctors and one of the nurses were Jewish.
David, I also want to ask...
The grace that it takes to treat that man is incredible.
Incredible,
anyway,
absolutely. I also want to ask you, we're looking at pictures
Sure.
of people that are gathering about, I guess, a half a mile from where you are right now. Many of them are holding signs that seem to be directed at the president, although it's unclear. What is your sense of how welcoming the crowd there is, or how pleased they are that the president is visiting?
So to that point, let me start with this. The mayor of the city of Pittsburgh is not expected to meet the president. We actually got a list of people who were going to be at the airport. It is customary for dignitaries to show up at the airport to meet the president. There was one person listed on the list of folks who were going to meet the president. That was notable. The mayor of Pittsburgh kind of signaled early on that he had no interest in meeting the president. But notably, the rabbi of this synagogue said within the last couple of days, hey, listen, the president is welcome to come here anytime. And there was a CNN report earlier today where the rabbi said, you know what, I'm too busy. I've gotten a lot of messages of hate since I made that statement, and so I don't expect to meet the president. I called the rabbi because I want to do some of our own reporting, and I got him on the phone. He had just left a funeral, and he said something kind of bizarre. He said, I can't answer that question because I don't have enough information to answer it. And I said, wait a minute, Rabbi, there's a report out that you said you were not going to go to meet the president. You said you would welcome the president to come anytime. What's the deal? And he kind of bizarrely said, I don't have enough information to answer your question. So that's the best answer I have for you right now. I'm not expecting that the rabbi will meet him.
David, we just saw two very large signs that folks were holding up there that said, Mr. President, you are not welcome here in Pittsburgh until you fully denounce white nationalism. I don't see it in front of me right now, so I'm sure that's not verbatim, but it was a very large sign, two of them, with words to that effect. Is that what you've been hearing as well?
Well, in fact, there is a rabbi of a left-leaning Jewish organization who did make it clear that the president should not be welcomed here until he denounces white nationalism. So yes, that has sort of been spreading. But I will tell you, there have been people who have come here today. A woman who I spoke to, an elderly woman, who said, listen, the president doesn't get a fair rap, right? She said something to me. She said, people don't get his style over his substance. She goes, I hate some of the things that he says, but I love some of the things that he does. Right? And that is some of the mood and emotion that I have heard from folks in this area. But again, with such a horrific situation, you might expect a lot of emotion. And I got to tell you, everyone's emotion has been so incredibly balanced. Everyone, from the rabbis who are coming out to talk, to the families who have spoken, to the doctors who have talked to us, and the medical professionals. It's truly been tremendous to meet the people of this community. They are a remarkable bunch. And you know, Tanya, I'm struck by the fact that the members of this synagogue, and remember, a synagogue contains multiple congregations under one roof. So at this synagogue, there were 3 different congregations that were worshiping at the time the gunman committed his rampage. It is worth noting that this synagogue had its congregants undergo active shooter training. Can you imagine that?
Oh my goodness.
These people who are Jewish have lived in fear for years, right? Long before this ever happened. And that's why they underwent active shooter training. And I can tell you from talking to one of the police officials, there is a belief within some members of law enforcement that the people who were injured and some of the people who died went into their active shooter training because the positions that they were found in indicated to law enforcement that they remembered in their head how best to get away from the gunman, right? Such as the folks who hid in that closet. There's that story of the gunman opening the closet door and not seeing more people inside the closet, right? He couldn't see them. So just incredible stories of heroism that come out. And listen, we talk about the gunman. There's no need to mention his name, but I will tell you this. He's in federal custody today. And a federal judge told him yesterday he's not getting out anytime soon. The prosecution asked that he be denied bail because they believe he is a flight risk. The judge agreed, and so he remanded him back into the custody of the United States Marshals. He is due back in court on Thursday. There is a possibility that that hearing could be postponed. He is charged with hate crimes, Tanya, that could carry the death penalty if he's convicted. But this was really interesting. Yesterday in court, he was given the option to have the judge read the possible penalties to him. And he waived his right to hear that. He told the judge, he told his attorney who told the judge there was no need to do that.
And David, prosecutors have stated that they intend to seek the death penalty. Isn't that right?
That is correct. They intend to. I mean, obviously, there has to be a conviction. Now, listen, you should know that some people have been on death row even after being federally prosecuted for a decade or more. So this is something where if he were to be convicted and if he were to be sentenced to death, it could be many years before that ever happens. I will tell you another thing that struck me was when he came into the courtroom, right? You hear a story of a man who's deranged, who's yelling, "Kill the Jews," and to law enforcement, even at the hospital. And so you go into the courtroom with maybe some expectations, right? That he may be somewhat despondent or crazed looking. He was anything but. He was sitting up straight. He was in a wheelchair, but he was alert. He was curious. He kind of scanned the courtroom, looked at everybody who was there, answered. They asked him to sign some documents, and he was handcuffed, but he said, "I can scribble." And the judge asked him some questions. He said yes. He was very articulate. He projected his voice, and then they were out. And there was a New York Times article that quoted 2 Jewish, I believe, members of this congregation who were in the court hearing. And interestingly, they said he didn't exude the kind of villain look, if you will, that they expected, right? It wasn't what they were expecting to see from a so-called madman.
It's upsetting to know that someone who you might not expect is capable of that level of evil. David Begnaud, thank you so much for your reporting there from Pittsburgh. We will, of course, check back in with you later this hour.